Okay, so with that, I do want to kind of ground us in just giving a little overview of what we mean when we say inclusive fellowships, right? And I believe inclusive fellowships is a term coined by Immigrants Rising, and this really refers to fellowship opportunities that are accessible to anybody, regardless of immigration status. So including undocumented students who may not have work authorization through like DACA or TPS. And I'm actually curious in the room if folks have an inclusive fellowship already, and give me a second to actually launch a Zoom poll for us to kind of name that. And when the poll launches, you'll see that there's 4 different options on there. And it should say, yes, we have one. Our campus used to have one, our organization has one, right? No, and unsure. Let me just give folks a couple minutes to do that. We're like at 59% participated. Okay. Anybody else want to throw their answer in? You should be able to see it on the screen. I'll just give it a couple more seconds. Okay, I'll kind of close it off there. I think most folks got a chance to participate. Let me see if I can share results. I think folks are able to see it on the screen, right? Yes, okay. Cool. Yes. And so, yeah, we can see here, right, that obviously a lot of folks are maybe more people voted no, right? Which is why we're here in this room today. And there's actually a couple of people, some more than our panelists, who were able to answer yes, and maybe a couple of folks too who were unsure. So maybe that's something to also investigate after this meeting. And so I'm going to stop sharing that. And with that, I'm also kind of curious, what gets in the way, right, of developing or sustaining these fellowships? And we're going to switch over to answer this in a different platform. You can go to menti.com and enter this code that's on the screen, 7825-4754. We'll throw that in the chat with you, or you can use the QR code if you have your phone handy to let us know what gets in the way of creating or sustaining these fellowship programs, these inclusive fellowship programs. Yeah, we could also throw the number in the chat, 7825-4754 actually. So let me actually go into let me see if I can turn this on. Oops, before I go into that. Okay. Okay. So it looks like we have folks voting on that. Good. Okay. Unsurprisingly, funding is the biggest word, which means it's the most that people are seeing as a barrier. Let's see. Capacity, I'm seeing. Policies, leadership, definition of employees, financial aid, right? Some campuses provide stipends for these opportunities through financial aid. Students may not have enough room in their package to do that. Confusing budget spots. I think that's also related to funding. Institutional support. Let's see what else. Award process, red tape, federal laws. Forms. Yeah, forms is, I think, another bureaucratic thing that we all deal with. Okay, as we're seeing this on the screen, I'm wondering if folks want to share out loud or in the chat more about what they included on here, or just kind of what they're seeing on the screen. And you can unmute yourself to do that. See bureaucracy, ignorance. I'm actually curious about that one. VPS is VPS. I don't think I know that acronym. If somebody wants to also talk about that. Yeah, any volunteers to talk about the barriers? I'm randomly going to call on a person then. That's okay. Unless we get a volunteer.
I want to speak on a personal barrier.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, my name is Stephanie. I introduced myself in the chat.
Mhm.
But I think personally, one of the barriers is that I just don't have information on how to start a fellowship. Like I don't know the process. I really don't have any background in a fellowship. So I just, it would be great to kind of understand how to start a fellowship from the ground up.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. I think you're in the right place. I know we'll be touching on that today, right? And our panelists will be sharing kind of how they did it too. And then I see other Stephanie from Stanford has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, I think for me, something that has been really difficult is that my students are fully funded. So they're at cap financial aid. So if I wanted to do a fellowship through a stipend, we can't do it because there's no room in their financial aid package.
Okay.
So that's where I have been stuck. So open to any ideas.
Yeah, thank you for naming that too, right? Yeah, most for undocumented students, I think I've seen a lot of schools be able to give them paid payments for their fellowships because of financial aid, and that could be a challenge if there's no more financial need in the student's package. Thank you for sharing that. And then I see in the chat, Millie's in the same boat as Stephanie, I think from Contra Costa, with not knowing exactly what it is or how to bring it to my campus. And then I see another comment around priorities of the schools may be in a barrier to starting fellowships, schools and state, and just consistent support, because once you do have the fellowship running, right, there's also somebody who needs to kind of run it and supervise the fellows and so on. Yeah.
If I could also,
yeah.
Going off of that, that ignorance of how do I even get started, but then that also really requires the cooperation with other departments that we see on the screen as well. Because then, like you said, right, even if it does get started, then it needs to be supported by others. And for that, we need buy-in to begin with, because there's still departments that don't even see the importance of starting something like this.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Gerson, for uplifting that too, Ray. Yeah, that not having that campus buy-in could be a pretty big barrier in even sustaining it, because I've known campuses who've been able to have one for a certain year, and then it's kind of hard to run as the Dream Resource Center person, because you're responsible for a million other things. So I hope that our panelists are also able to kind of address this as we go into that portion of it. So I'm just gonna transition us out of this section. Thank you all for participating, and have us go to our next part. I'm working with one monitor today, so I'm a little bit less techie. But I'll start us off right with just giving kind of like the overview of inclusive fellowship programs. And we do have this really great resource that we'll throw in the chat of how to create these fellowship programs actually for educational institutions. So this might be a good starting point for people who are like, well, I don't know how to kind of get started, or even like how to explain it to other folks, right? And so this resource actually does provide the definition of what fellowships are, what are inclusive fellowships specifically, and how are they different from like traditional campus employment or those opportunities that do require work authorization. And this guide also does give kind of like guidelines for what those inclusive fellowships should be that make them different from fellowships that do require opportunities that do require work authorization. And so the main thing with these fellowships is they're really more for the benefit of the fellow or the student who's part of it, and less so of the host site or the kind of like the department that's hosting the fellow, right? So it's more about giving training, hands-on experiential learning, professional development to those fellows. The relationship between fellows and host sites should really be more like a trainee, trainer, and advisee, advisor, rather than employee, employer. And the primary purpose of it should really be to benefit the fellow, whether that be through education, professional growth, or training for them. And they can offer stipends as long as they're not considered wages. This resource does go a little bit more deeply on some of maybe like the legal implications for these things. And so I do encourage folks to kind of maybe dig a little bit more deeply into it. And it's just kind of like guidance for like more complicated things. We do really encourage folks to maybe talk to legal providers that are available at their campus if they're there, to kind of get a little bit more guidance. But this resource does also kind of talk about some initial steps on how to get something like this started on your campus, including kind of talking to campus stakeholders and building buy-in. And there's also a webinar on the page if people kind of want to see more. Okay, and then let me see, I see something on the chat. Okay, so I see Shaila mentioned take note on the language you use as well. We don't want to use jobs or paid, instead use fellowship, internship, award to kind of stay within labor laws. And then we do also have some additional resources we kind of want to uplift again for people to maybe familiarize yourself, build awareness, help other people become familiar with the concept of inclusive fellowships, right? The President's Alliance has this really great FAQ also on like experiential and funding opportunities for undocumented students. They have a lot of great resources on fellowships in general, but this specific one I'm pointing out, again, kind of focuses on some of those legal considerations were actually developed by lawyers on how to build these opportunities, because I think one of the main kind of concerns when it comes to this, right, is like, is this even allowed? Is it legal to have these fellowships? And this document does answer some of those questions. Rocio just threw that in the chat as well. And then I think another concern that maybe I didn't quite see in the challenges, but has come up for students, is sometimes fellowship sites do ask undocumented students for background checks, which could be a really scary experience, or even just a barrier that gets in the way of even being able to be a fellow at that site. And the California Undocumented Higher Education Coalition actually also created another FAQ on this, and kind of gives a definition of what background checks exist here in California, how undocumented students can navigate, and how to kind of give them information so that they're best informed and can make like an informed decision whether or not they should be doing background checks. In general, this resource does talk about background checks are possible for undocumented students, like they can take those. I think the more complicated cases tend to be students with quote unquote like criminal backgrounds, or have like deportation orders. And so again, I think connecting with like a legal provider is always a good idea when it comes to those cases. But that's something to also maybe think about if you're working with other host sites who deal with background checks for their fellows. And then let me take a pause to see if there's a question in the chat. Okay, I see Pedro actually introduced themselves, pronouns he, him, West Hills Community College, Coalinga. Would the DSIG program from CSEC, would that be a fellowship? So thank you for that question, because actually my next slide is on DSIG, which is the Dreamer Service Incentive Grant. And I uplift this as an opportunity. I don't think this exactly qualifies as an inclusive fellowship based on the definition we kind of worked with. But this is another opportunity, right, for undocumented students who may not have work authorization. The eligibility requirements is you do have to have a Cal Grant B eligibility and be able to apply to the California DREAM Act, right? So we know that not all students are able to benefit from that exactly, but this could be another opportunity because it does provide a grant for students after they complete a certain number of hours. at a service organization, and then they get that money. It could be kind of like a harder process, right? Because students need to apply for this in a separate application than the California Dream Act, and they also do not get all the money until they've completed all their hours. And they can only actually submit a payment request form after completing 100 hours. But I recently, I include this because I actually went to a conference this past week where UC Riverside had built a whole kind of like inclusive fellowship program by taking advantage of DSIG. And a similar community college in the Inland Empire also has something similar to that. I think that was Norco College. And so that's a separate conversation, but I think something for folks to also think about if funding is a really big issue for you all. Could something like DSIG kind of help fill in some of that gaps as you all work on those other inclusive fellowship opportunities? And I see somebody's hand is up. Evelyn, do you want to say something?
Yes. So for this district, do I have to work with the financial aid in order to get that implemented? Or can I just start having the students apply for it already? I'm a little confused on that part because I've been wanting to get it implemented, but it looks like it was combined with something different, with a different org that now have. How would that work? Can you go a little bit of detail? Do I have to go through the financial aid or just have the students apply for it and submit it to the place that which is the DSIG grant?
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure about the last part of like an organization switch that you're speaking about, but I do know that the money for this, like the grant that folks receive, does need to come through financial aid. Also, one of the other requirements needed for this is students need to have like a certain amount of room in their financial aid package in order to qualify, which doesn't solve that barrier we talked about earlier. So we do see that schools who have been really successful with DSIG have been those who work with their financial aid, like collaborate with their financial aid and doing the outreach and making sure students kind of get awarded the money. So that's kind of a practice that's just recommended. I think Amy from CSAC, who actually runs the DSIG program, joined us earlier. I don't know if she's still in the
I'm still here.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. If you I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, do I have to go through the financial aid in order for the students to apply for this type of grant? Or can I have them just apply for it and submit their application directly to CSAC?
Because it is considered financial aid, it does need to go through the financial aid office. So the student would have to either bring the form to financial aid so that they can confirm the Cal Grant eligibility piece for DSIG. So yeah, it would need to go through financial aid, and the model that Madeline was describing is the most efficient one, where either the department where the student's going to be volunteering with on campus partners with the financial aid office, and it's kind of more of a collaborative effort between, let's say, the Dreamers Resource Center and the financial aid office. That way it's a smooth transition for the student, and along with the payment request, that also would require some somebody in the financial aid office to validate that payment request. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And then it looks like Millie from Shasta College also is able to use DSIG at their campus to benefit their students. So Evelyn, that might be somebody to connect with to be on this meeting. And then I think I saw somebody else raise their hand to potentially answer this question. Does that person want to say something before we move on? I think it was Daniela.
Yeah, I was gonna say yes, that you do have to work with your financial aid office, because part of the paperwork is your financial aid. Somebody from the financial aid office has to verify the paperwork for the student. So when the student is first signing up, and then as the person from CSAC mentioned, like when the release of payment. So you really have to work with the financial aid office in order to make sure that the student is enrolled, and like that's just part of the application process.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. Angel?
Yeah, so I could add more into this. So we work closely with financial aid, the department, and it all starts with the actual application. So we work with financial aid and to submit the application, but pretty much the DRC serves as like the outreach. So we pretty much advocate for the student. We find a place for the student, depending on their interest. We pretty much take the lead on this, and then we guide to the student, and then we have a docu liaison for financial aid. So we work closely with him for the student to get approved, and then he and the director meet and they send that actual application. And we just have to wait for a response from CSAC, and then once the student is approved, then he or she could start with the internship, if I should say that, internship and depending on their, something that we do at the Dream Center, we host students for this program. And then pretty much how we calculate the hours, not calculate, but like get information about the hours or organize the hours is that we do have in like an online kind of like for them to note their hours and the things that they have done. And then at the end of the semester, once they completed their hours, we attach that document to prove that the student has done the hours. And then I do provide also my signature. And then that's when pretty much the student will submit the other form. It kind of looks the same as the application. And then that's where they receive their fellowship stipend.
Yeah, thank you, Angel, for sharing that. Evelyn, I see you have another question, but I'll ask you to maybe hold it and just put it in the chat because I know our panelists are starting to get into it and speak a little bit more about their opportunities. So I'm actually going to take that as kind of just a transition to our panel. I know folks probably have more questions. DSIG is a very big thing to talk about. So I know we had previously done a roundtable on it actually, but I'm going to do another one in the future because I'm hearing more and more kind of practices that people are using around that. And so Evelyn, please put your question in the chat or message it to me to address it a little bit later. But I'll transition us to our panel. They've already introduced themselves earlier, but maybe I'll have Rocio kind of help in spotlighting them. But again, we have Daniela Barcenas from CSU Northridge. All of them work with their Dream Resource Center, their undocumented student program, right? Angel Aguilar Garcia from San Diego Mesa College and Shaila Ramos from DeAnza College. So I think they should be spotlighted already. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can be able to see them. And so I'm going to kick us off with our panel just by asking them to describe what the inclusive fellowship opportunities are on their campus. When was it created? If you have an idea of how many students have been able to benefit. And funding was a big question, right? If you could kind of maybe share where you all are getting the funding for that. And we'll go in the order that I read people's names off. So we'll go with Daniela first, Angel, and then Shaila.
Yeah, so we don't have an official fellowship program created at CSUN just yet through the Dream Center, but I've consulted with different departments and the different departments have been able to create fellowship opportunities within their areas. So what I do is basically just tell them, so what's your funding source? Where is the money coming from? And how are you going to release the payment to the student or the grant? On our campus, the main thing is everything has to go through financial aid, and that's just a practice via CSUN. And even if the stipend or grant is released to the student via the specific department, it still needs to be reported to financial aid at all times. So any form of funding always needs to be reported for financial aid, and that's a CSUN practice. I'm not sure how it might be for other campuses. So one of the things that we've run into issues with is the unmet need, where we have some undocumented hustlers, right, who have a ton of scholarships. And because of that, there's no room in their financial aid package. Something that I've been working with financial aid with is potentially being able to increase their unmet need. However, that doesn't guarantee them being able to receive additional grants and money. So that again, it's a give or take. We're still trying to figure it out, to be quite honest. But one of the main things that I would give advice for folks when creating fellowships, creating the fellowship agreement, to be quite honest, has been the quote unquote easier part, at least on our end, on my end on the campus, as far as like the duties and what the fellowship would entail, whether it's research-based, project-based. That's been the quote unquote easier part. However, we've always been running into issues when it comes to the funding. So what's the funding source? Is it state-based, federally based? Is it a grant? Where are you receiving the money from? I ran into issues where there was a fellowship program via the business department, and it was for tax preparers, and it met all of the requirements, the hours, the way that the student was going to participate. They had to meet certain requirements. They had to do a project at the end of the fellowship. The issue was the funding source. So it was a grant. It was a grant that the business department applied for, and they had a specific stipulation that said, in order to participate in this, to receive funding from this grant, you need to have eligibility for work authorization as determined by USCIS. So although technically the fellowship would be inclusive to undocumented students, it would be undocumented students with work authorization. So so folks get confused, right? Where they're like, oh, all undocumented students have work authorization, and that's obviously not the case. So that was the issue that we ran into with that one. Thankfully, the department had the capacity to tap into other funding sources and was still able to provide the opportunity to the student. But again, it depends. It depends on the funding sources per campus and per department that they have availability to. Something that I've been trying to implement on my campus is using my foundation's money, where those are donations specifically made to the Dream Center. And I don't want to center all fellowships in the Dream Center, because that's just not inclusive, right? Not everybody wants to work at a Dream Center. They want to be in the science building. They want to be engineers. They want to be at the career center, maybe outreach, right? So how I've been trying to make it more inclusive, where I tell different departments, I'm okay with funding the first year of your fellowship program if you're ready, but you also need to find funding to continue it, to be able to make it continuous. But if you want to start it off, I can definitely help you and figure that out as far as the funding. But in order, again, to make it inclusive and to actually make the campus be undocu-friendly, it needs to be something that is taken up by the department. It's not something that's always coming from the Dream Center. So that's something that I've been very vocal about in the different spaces. And then I also want to touch a little bit on DSIG. So we are trying to also formalize DSIG on our campus. And same thing, we've been working as like essentially consultants and like telling folks how to create these opportunities for students. And through our partnership, we've been able to actually, so the LRC, the Learning Resource Center here on campus, is working with DSIG and creating these fellowship or volunteer opportunities for students through the DSIG program, because the money is coming from the state. The only barrier, I would say, is the fact that the student doesn't get the money till at the end. And even sometimes it does get delayed. And by the time that they get the money, there might be they might have earned additional scholarships. Again, like there's just so many things that happen with their financial aid. So something to look out for, y'all, I would say, is just the unmet need and financial aid part. Those are the biggest issues that I ran into. Creating the opportunities, to be quite honest, has been, again, I'll use this in quotations, easier part. But it's more of the releasing of payment and the way that the stipend is like granted to the student, or scholarship, whatever verbiage your campus is comfortable with. But I'll stop there and I'll let the rest of the panelists go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniela, for just sharing all of that. I think you answered a couple of my other questions already, but we'll circle back to you at some point. But yeah, so I do think something to just highlight from that, right, is the partnerships, like the collaborations, the like activating other folks on campus to help provide this opportunity, especially because some of those departments may have the funding, may be able to kind of like work with that, since that's the biggest barrier. So I'll just uplift that before going to Angel to answer the question, which is just around describing the opportunity that's on your campus. I know you have a couple. When was it kind of created? Or how are you all funding that? And if you're able to tell us how many students have been able to benefit.
So for us at San Diego Mesa College, we do have the fellowship, which is called MIP, which is the Impactship program that we have for our undocumented students. So, well, mainly for disadvantaged students, I should say. So pretty much we have the work-based experience department. And this is different from the Career Center. So the Career Center, they have their own space, they have their own center, and then we have the work-based experience center where they specialize on just focusing on giving students the experience pretty much work experience through internships. And something that when I arrived to San Diego Mesa College, it grabbed my interest to know more about that specific department, because that's something that I have not have um heard of, or like when I was working with other well, with other colleges. So when I got here, I was just as a coordinator trying to be resourceful and see ways to help our undocumented students. So this really grabbed my interest, and then pretty much I scheduled an appointment with the coordinator. So we worked really closely, and something that we did to pretty much spark the interest of students, especially students who um, are eligible for DACA, but at this moment they cannot apply. So especially focusing on the non-documented students, we will provide info sections for them to be able to have a spark an interest and let them know that it is possible for them to have an internship opportunity, and make sure that they have like the work experience. So something unique about this program, and by the way, this program was implemented way before I got here. So it was something that San Diego Mesa College had. I just pretty much had to connect it to our undocumented students, because there was like no advocacy or pretty much something for our undocumented students, that building that bridge pretty much. And not many students knew about this opportunity. So I took the lead on this and worked closely with the coordinator, like I mentioned, to really develop info sections, workshops, to really help and outreach our undocumented students for them to take advantage of this opportunity. I know that for San Diego Mesa College, we have 3 different options that students could do, and the counselors pretty much based on the screening that we do, we decide what option would be work best for this for the student. And many for our non-documented students, this option for the impactship work best for them. And then something unique about the program too as well is that students are able to not just find like an internship here at Mesa, like within different departments, because what Daniela mentioned, that there's different students that want to have an interest of different departments and want to work or have the experience with financial aid, or more about like the science building, or like the science department. So pretty much we well, pretty much I advocate for the student and I reach out to the department. Same thing, I take the lead on this. And same thing with the coordinator of the program. We take the lead on reaching out to the departments, and then to let them know that this student is interested in doing some type of internship at the department, if they're willing to take the student. Something else that we do as well is that if the student has an interest when it comes to external organizations, or like to gain more experience, we also outreach to that organization. This is just an example. We live by close to the San Diego Zoo, and I know that there was a student that wanted to become, or had an interest to become an vet. So we had to reach out to that organization, well, not organization, but the San Diego Zoo, and advocate with for the student. And I know that they had their own protocols, and we had to really explain the purpose of this program that we have for San Diego Mesa College. So pretty much like that, we just take the lead and advocate for the student, for them to get that work experience. And for us, we do host some students to the DRC. Some of them, they do want to learn more about the DRC and what we do as counselors. So we take those students in, and there's other students at different departments as well. And then something about this course, well, it's a program, but the student has to enroll to this course. for them to receive that stipend. I feel like I could just share my screen if that's okay, just to give you more about like the steps of what we do, just for them to start here at Mesa College. So we have the work, like I mentioned, like the work-based learning. And pretty much for the student has to be identified as an underserved student. The other requirements that they have to enroll in the occupational work, which is the Work 270, and that is only one unit, and that in this course is only transferable to a Cal State. They have to pretty much they do have some type of assignments that they have to do, which is pretty much reflections, and they have to submit it through Canva. And then pretty much the steps, like I mentioned, they have to complete the MIP intake form. They have to enroll into the work experience course, which is the 270. Attend a mandatory kickoff event, and secure the site where we come in as coordinators and help the students to secure the site. And then for them to be able to obtain the stipend, they have to complete at least 60, no more than, well, at least 60 units. I'm sorry, 60 hours for them to be able to get the one stipend during that specific semester. And then something that we did with the coordinator is that since we have the funding, and if I'll be being honest with when it comes to the funding, I know it comes from the school, but I don't know like the specific where it goes with the funding, because this program was already established when I got here. So that's something that I could ask, and I'm pretty sure I could get the answer and share that with you all. But again, and then the student could also be re-enroll into the 271 course for the following semester if they want to continue their internship at that specific department. So there's pretty much the student could be getting the internship ongoing. But the only thing about this is that the con about this is that the units is only transferable to a Cal State. If they want to go to a UC, the units will not count. I mean, this is like a simple process based on, compared to DSIG or the other opportunities that we have. And pretty much students are earning a stipend and students are being engaged.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angel. And I know that you were able to share this visual you just showed us, right? So folks can kind of look a little bit more about that. But I think I just, again, really want to highlight that you kind of took something that already exists that has like the structure, right? And I really like that point where you're like, how can we just connect undocumented students to this to make sure that it's not just you doing the work and hosting all of the interns at your center too, because that's its own kind of its own barrier and just work. And I think that having it already be existing on the campus is also a way to get the campus buy-in because it's already there kind of thing. And how do we just kind of form those connections? I think there's a specific question to you in the chat that I'll let you answer in the chat so that we can also move on to Shaila to share the opportunity on their campus.
Awesome, thank you. It's so interesting to me that everyone has a different process, which is pretty cool, right? There's different ways of doing this, which I think is awesome. It's just like figuring out within your college, within your institution, how that works. But for us, so we are a undocumented student resource center that was started by students called HEFAS, Higher Education for AB 540 students. I was a student at DeAnza back then when it started, back in 2012. We literally had a program, but we weren't getting paid. Like we were doing it for free. It wasn't until 2015 that we formalized the internship program and were able to get funding via our student government. Though that's state funding right there too, or through enrollment, right? So only folks that had work authorization were able to use that. And so we were like, how can we extend this to undocumented folks? So we, were able to get some grants via some community partners like Castellano Family Foundation, which sunsetted last year, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, donations via our president's office, things like that. We were able to build a really healthy foundation account and able to transfer those funds to our financial aid, and they were able to distribute it via a scholarship system. So that's kind of what we created initially in 2016, is the Immigrant Justice Scholarship, we called it. Now we've changing the language more towards fellowship, because a scholarship to me, it's like a one-time thing, although we did have some like some asks to students in regards to that scholarship, which, you know, I can share with you the language that we changed to fellowship shortly. As far as how many students have participated, over 70 students since 2016. Currently, we have around 12 interns. We started with maybe 5 to 7 interns. And we have, I mean, our leadership development program is amazing, which is something that I love to do as a mentor myself. One of the things that we have been able to do within our internship program is also see what other programs can have us as a placement. So we've worked with California Youth Leadership Corps, which we have at DeAnza, which there's so much funding within that program itself. And I'm happy to talk more about it if folks are interested in that program. But they're able to award undocumented students via that funding. Also the Mellon Scholars programs as well. That system is already set up to be able to accept undocumented students. And so we actually have some of our interns getting paid through those different, or not getting paid, getting awarded, remember? Getting awarded through those different programs as well as our own. So we have our student government, which covers our work authorization students. We have a foundation account, which covers our undocumented students without work authorization. And then we partner with other organizations that are also able to cover undocumented students as well. So that collaboration has been really amazing. Our students receive around 4,000 to 5,500 a year. And so that's distributed via each quarter or every month as well, if they would prefer. So we've been able to have that connection with financial aid, which, you know, from hearing from Daniela too, like that's a relationship that is so crucial, right? Because that's one of the easiest ways to get money to the students. Now we're trying to make it so now we're working with our foundation to see, can we create direct stipends, like checks that are going to go directly to our students from the foundation. We actually have a meeting next week with the foundation folks to figure that piece out. That used to be a reality until E-Verify came into the picture. And then institutions got really nervous around providing stipends because of those labor law issues, right? That thin line. And so that's why we're so conscious about the language that we use as we describe our scholarships or our fellowships or internships. So yeah, that's a little bit about that. More recently, in the last 2 years, students had the idea of actually applying to a grant to start a new program called UndocuSTEM, which has been really awesome, creating opportunities for students in STEM fields, right? And one of the things that Daniela was talking about is like, yes, not all students want to work at the Dream Resource Center, right? And so that's also something that we're exploring with this program. We got $25K the first year, $35K the second year. We're currently applying for a third year funding. That has allowed us to get 5 to 6 interns funded, again, via the foundation, so they can be undocumented or they can have, you know, any, you know, status for that matter. And we're placing them into different departments on or off campus institutions or organizations that meet their professional or career interest, because this is a fellowship. So that's something that we're a place where we're growing and that we're exploring a little bit more. I would like to share really quickly, and I'll share this in the chat as well as a PDF, a little of how our newest language looks like in regards to the fellowship, which it was easy to make, because we use the Immigrants Rising's fellowship language. And so thank you for that, Immigrants Rising. And so as you can see, we have a description of the fellowship. We do use language of like professional development, exploring careers. This one specifically in regards to like immigrant human rights work. The UndocuSTEM one is separate, it's a different one, but this one's for students that maybe want to work at the Undocumented Student Resource Center or Dream Centers, right? So like what they would get, like networking exposure, getting a quarterly stipend, etc. so they can feel confident about their academic and professional abilities. And then award information, potential project sites. So again, working with our community partners, the eligibility. So just have demonstrated educational or professional interest in immigrant human rights, being good academic standing, come from a diverse background, etc. And then the description. And so that the description here is, it's what's important. It's what makes it a fellowship, right? So the participation in the research project, right? Submitting the quarterly reflections, being matched with the faculty or staff mentor, participate in professional development trainings, leadership development, etc. So that's a little bit about how, you know, we use that language from Immigrants Rising to create our own description of our fellowship. And I'm more than happy to share this in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Shaila, and also for just sharing that resource, right? I think the language is kind of certain like concerns for folks, right? Because that's the thing that kind of raises up like legal flags, quote unquote. So thank you for just uplifting that resource too. But again, just another thing about like partnerships, right, is another common thing I heard, like how to kind of leverage like foundation money to make it as accessible to as many undocumented students as possible, but still also having that relationship with financial aid, because it does sound like that's one of the main avenues for students to get that kind of money. So thank you for sharing that too. And I think folks kind of answered a lot of the questions that I actually had for the panel, but just something I kind of really want to hone on in as just maybe our second to last question before we close it out is building these relationships, these collaborations is hard, like especially for folks who's responsible for so many different things, are most likely understaffed, right? The only person doing this work on their campus. And so I'm wondering if folks kind of maybe have just some advice or some like guidance on how people can build or strengthen those relationships to kind of increase like buy-in for these fellowships too, right? I'm kind of curious for Daniela to maybe kick us off, because you don't have the official program yet, but you have found a way to work with other departments to kind of do that. Like, could you talk a little bit about how you built those relationships and any advice for people around that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely isn't easy, I will say. The way that I've kind of gone about it is traditionally students come to me and they tell me, hey, I really want to participate in this. And this is an opportunity that was offered to me, but this X, Y, and Z barrier. So we've kind of been working backwards, to be quite honest, where we're essentially putting out fires. And so I reach out to the department and I'm like, hey, so what can we do? How is it that we can make this opportunity inclusive? And for not only this particular student that is interested, but like other students, right? And so in working with them and kind of giving them, again, the buy-in of like, well, you know, more students would be eligible to participate in the program and X, Y, and Z. They've been pretty open about it. But again, it hasn't been easy, where some departments are like, oh, sorry, we just don't have the capacity. And that they've also done that. But there are some folks within these departments that some will say like, oh, we're willing to work with you. Just let us know what we need to do. And so then that's where I kind of come in and say, okay, give me an overview of what your department, how is your department structured? And then we work together, because at the end of the day, I don't know what their department looks like, their funding and all of these, their internal structures, but I can definitely work with them as far as like, how to implement it based off of the lens of like being inclusive to undocumented students. So that's, again, that's kind of how I've been going about it. And so although we don't have like an official fellowship through established, we do have like partnerships with like I worked with the engineering department, I worked with the business department, I also worked with the science department, where they all three of those areas, the LRC, all three of them were able to create opportunities for our students and like provide funding for the students. And through those partnerships, they've connected me with other folks who are saying, okay, well, we want to start this off the right way. So how can we already incorporate this into our fellowship? And so then working with them and already having those stipulations on there. I know Shaila and Angel touched upon this a little bit. We really making sure that we're not saying like employment. I'm currently working on a fellowship a fellowship flow chart where I would be releasing it to my campus and basically telling them this is what you need to do to create a fellowship within your areas. I'm gonna share on the chat right now. I have a little chart where it says do's and don'ts when it comes to verbiage. Again, like the main thing to think is like students who are fellowship based cannot do what your paid employees are doing. So they cannot cover your front desk. That simple as that, right? They cannot cover your front desk. Anything that you're paid officially paid employees do, the fellows cannot participate in that because they're not employees. They're fellows. So they have very specific duties that they need to create or that they need to follow. They create their own schedules, right? There's hours that they need to complete. They create their own schedules, but you can also include some hours based off of your department needs, right? If you're open from 9 to 2, but the fellow's only available 3 to 5, then it's like, okay, that's not going to work, right? That's just also there's gives and takes. There's definitely room for improvement, but I'll definitely share that in the chat. But yeah, y'all, I hope what I provide is helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniela, for that, right? I really also just like the point of like connecting with some of those departments opens up more departments for you to connect with, right? And just the importance of like raising their awareness on what a fellowship is and is not too. And so I'll, Angel, can I have you kind of maybe chime in on this question just around, you know, building partnerships and how you kind of gone about that to, to get fellowships like this in place?
So one of the things I feel like that I did first was like when I was new to this campus was trying to gather as much as possible information about the like different departments, like what they did, introducing myself, going to the actual centers, just to learn more about like what they do and how they could collaborate with us at the DRC. And that's when I pretty much got introduced into the coordinator for the MIP program. His name is Pavel. So I got introduced to him and I saw about like what they did, which I feel like this was a great opportunity to build this bridge for our undocumented students because our population it's underserved. So because of this, pretty much students, there's a process which it really takes with the intake form, like about their interests, so we could gather more like information about like what the interests and what they want to intern at. And then based on that, once the students gets the information and once they go on the onboarding process, they have to secure the site. So the DRC, depending on the student interest, we do host some students for the internship for the MIP program. And as the supervisor, I oversee their work. And within their program, it's really specific where they have to do some type of contract. And then on the contract, it would list their objectives. And they have to have 3 objectives. And based on the objectives, that's their pretty much what they have to like accomplish by the end of the semester. And it could be simple things as like doing like a workshop for our undocumented students. I have one student who wanted to inform better our undocumented students about this program. So that was like one of his objectives. The other objective that I had another student was to present in his classes about this program for anyone to be informed. Because again, this is for the general population, but specifically they had to be underserved. So one of the ways that we check is with their financial aid. With the EFC, it's if it's 0, you know, we would take them in. And same thing with their we have to check their unmet need, which is kind of like different from the EFC, which is like the estimated family contribution. So we have a process, like I mentioned, when we screen the students, and pretty much that's what we do, and we collaborate like together. So I have a really good relationship with the coordinator. Like when we first did this, we did a bunch of info sections at different days and times, just for students to get more informed. And then I feel like once the students' objectives was to present in their classes, and then to have like a space for them to do those info sections, I feel like that helped us a lot when it came to helping our other undocumented students who were not informed of about this program. And so far since I've been here, this was we first did this. It was actually last spring semester, 2022, I believe. Yeah, 2022. Which was like it's been ongoing, and I feel like overall it's been such a great experience for our students because of course, they learn more about about their interests and whether they want to, do something within some type of career, becoming a counselor, becoming a professor. And especially I feel like what's something they do, it's like they enhance their, skills when it comes to different like presentation skills. Um, does that answers the question?
Yeah, no, thank you for that too. And I think you also just really highlighted like the benefit to the students too, right? And also like doesn't limit them to like just working again for the Dream Resource Center. I think that's like a constant thing I've also been hearing from beyond this space, but just like our undocumented students are really also diverse in what they want to do. Like the immigration status is not stopping them from dreaming to be a certain thing, right? And how can we kind of like foster that in these spaces too? But I think just want to uplift, right? Like this is a new program or this is a new part of the program that you're just starting, and like just introducing yourself and letting people know who you are on the campus is really just a first step, or like a really big first step in getting the stuff like this, opportunities like this started on the campus. So I'll turn it over to Shaila to just, maybe share anything around those partnerships, or if there's other advice you just kind of want to uplift that was helpful for you all in transitioning your opportunity to how it kind of like stands today.
Yeah, and I'll be quick because I want to leave some place for questions and whatnot. One is to create a task force, right? Ours is called EJUS, Educational Justice for Undocumented Students. Or before it was known as like 8540 Task Force, but we changed it. And have folks from all over the college, right? Your financial aid director, admissions and records, enrollment services, outreach. You'll be able to organize a lot better in that way. And so, that way everybody is connected. Okay, like this person does this person does that, or we need this from you. And so I think that's one of the first things. Also, create a foundation account. That's first step, right? If you don't have one already, talk with your foundation around creating a specific account where people can donate to that account, or even you can, because you have a foundation, if you do, you're able to actually apply to grants because you would be a nonprofit. So that's another opportunity that we really used a lot. And so I really suggest for folks to look into that too, as well. We're mostly actually funded by grants. And less so by our college, which is, funny. we have been asking for it. And then of course get the support from, whatever division you're at, from your dean, whatever power players, that would be helpful to kind of move the work forward as well. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much, Shaila. Yeah. So I do also want to, I'm looking at the time, I do want to also just recognize our panelists and give them virtual round of applause, appreciations, however you want to do that, chat, little emoji things. Thank you all so much for sharing all that you did today. I know I got a lot of ideas that I also kind of like want to uplift in our different spaces, right? Given like, I don't even need to really say, but with like DACA being such a mess, immigration being such a mess in this country, how can we still have those different opportunities for students? And keep like empowering them, providing those spaces for them, regardless of all that's happening. And so I think we might not quite, I'll see if there's any, maybe like a question, a comment, just anything that folks maybe want to ask before we kind of like start closing out. I actually don't think we will have time for a breakout rooms, but I do want to leave people with some questions beyond the space too, right before we close out. So is there any comments, questions from people? I see there's some appreciations in the chat. Lots of great information. We'll also be sharing everybody's contact information from the panel. So I know I didn't get to answer everybody's question in the chat. Amy, thank you for answering some of those too. And so you all can reach out to them after. Any questions or comments from people? Okay, I see more appreciations. I think maybe people are like absorbing lots of different strategies you all shared too. Cool. Okay. So if there's not, I know like you all also had different materials to share. So we'll include that in the follow-up email. Okay. There's actually a question. I don't know if anybody is able to answer this. And if not, we can maybe find a way to address it at another session. Does anyone have any experience creating these opportunities at the high school level?
I have one thing. I mean, I haven't had necessarily creating it. We've given advice and stuff like that, and we go to the high schools to present. But one thing to know for everyone, which is going to change the game a little bit, in California, more recently, there was a policy passed that at the district level, high schools are able to apply for a grant. It's called a Dream Center High School Grant or something like that. And so if you work with high schools, please do let them know, like to ask their district about the application process, to receive a grant to start a Dream Research Center at the high school level. And I feel like that's going to bring more students to us. It'll also increase our relationships with the high schools as well as a community college, you know, and also just higher education as a whole. I'm sure they're going to invite us. I'm sure they're going to ask for our support. There's going to be, you know, that increased connection. And so I'm super excited for that, to be able to connect more with our high schools.
Yeah, Angel?
So for us, at Mesa, we don't have like any like set form to help students when it comes to fellowships, but something that we do as counselors is that we do see prospect students. So prospect students, many of them are either returning students after taking some time off, or pretty much like high school students who are gonna be or attempting to come to San Diego Mesa College. So we pretty much help the students. And when it comes to those prospect students, especially at the high school students that are gonna be about to graduate, or coming next year, we pretty much tell them about all the resources available to them. And one of the things that we highlight will be the fellowships that we have, especially since the new wave for students that we're getting, the freshman students who are undocumented, are non-DACA recipients. So when we give that information to them, they're really interested and they keep that in mind. For the next time that they come, we actually want to actually enroll, then we could help them. But right now, it's just planting the seed to the student that this opportunity, it's available for them once they come to San Diego Mesa College.
Yeah, thank you, Angel, for naming that too. And thank you, Virginia, for your question. Oh, you're a coordinator of the High School Dream Center. That's really great to hear that too. I think with Alhambra Unified, right? But yeah, I think part of that too is like, I do hear a lot of undocumented students not wanting to go to college because they don't think there's any like opportunities for them there, right? Like beyond the degree, the learning, the classes. And so how can we also maybe like uplift this if we are working with high schools or working with specific feeder schools, that there are fellowship opportunities that exist in our different campuses to do that. Yeah, and then I see that Rocio is actually talking about partnership with San Francisco Unified School District to help develop a fellowship model under their workforce development program, focus more on entrepreneurship. So maybe that's something that we also will uplift at another session. But yeah, thank you all for your really great insights and everything. The panel is recorded, so you can watch it as many times as you want and take more detailed notes of the different strategies. I do want everybody to give like another round of applause, virtual appreciations, whatever, to our panelists for sharing all that they did. And so I'm going to close this out just so we can kind of like have a wrap up. I'm sorry we did not get a chance to do our breakout rooms today. That's always like an interesting part for me, but I do want everybody to maybe leave with some questions and just things to reflect on. I'll have Rocio throw this in the chat as well for me. But yeah, like what's maybe something for folks to think about, what's something new that they learned today, right? What can I take back to my campus or organization, and what can I explore more beyond this meeting? I know for sure, like those partnerships that folks talked about that really help build and sustain these fellowships could be a really good first step. Like who in my campus can I talk to maybe get something like this started and help me fund it? Because that's one of the biggest issues we saw, right? And so I just want to close this out again. Our next roundtable is actually going to be on December 14, last one of the calendar year. I hope many folks heard that the California Dream Act is also going through its own updates, like the FAFSA. It's not as being like uplifted in spaces that I've been, so don't forget that that's also happening. It is it has not been released yet. It'll be released sometime in December, hopefully with a date soon attached to it. But because of that, the priority deadline's not until April 2nd. So please join us next month to actually put that, to actually hear a little bit more about that and how schools are preparing for it. Rocio just threw the link in the chat to register. And we at Immigrants Rising are just doing our own trying to increase our own understanding of California DREAM Act needs and promising practices. So we have this whole landscape survey actually, and it's targeted to people who work at financial aid, who support undocumented students at the 3 systems listed there. Please help us fill this out so we can see kind of like what are the needs educators are having when it comes to supporting California DREAM Act applicants, and what are some practices that are really working. This will help us improve our trainings, our meetings, and provide recommendations to other state and campus stakeholders. And you could win a $50 Target gift card, so that's always fun, I think. And you will put the link for that in the chat too, but the survey is available at bit.ly/achieve-dream, and there's a QR code also on the screen if you have not taken that yet. And then Shaila already put it on the chat, but here is the contact information for all our panelists. They're really amazing people. Also do, I know, like speaking engagements at different events. So if you need somebody to talk to just maybe also brainstorm, talk to how to talk to campus leadership, right? Please reach out to them too. And my contact information is here if you also want to reach out. So I think with that, I'm going to close this out. We're actually a little bit early, but thank you all for being here. I hope I see everybody again at our next roundtable, and have a great rest of your day.